Hello, AP US History. Just to kind of give you a flash of where we are right now, we have just been talking about the colonizing of South America by the Spanish. So we very quickly covered the Spanish contact with the Aztecs in particular. And we talked a tiny, tiny bit about what was happening in North America, the fact that there weren't large civilizations, but there were several nations. And now we're going to get to the planting of English America. So now the English are starting to colonize the New World. The area is going to be the east coast of the United States, present day United States. And this corresponds to chapter 2, especially the last few pages of chapter 2 of your textbook. So I'm going to go through this planting of English America. So go ahead and set up this as your topic. And we're going to start on this today. And we're going to learn the main motives for colonization. What you're going to be doing at the end of this particular lesson is you're going to be comparing the two areas of English colonies, the New England colonies and the Chesapeake colonies. We're going to start off with Chesapeake today. As soon as you get this topic written down, remember this is a recording, so you can go back, pause, repeat as often as you need to. Okay. So it's important that we know background of what's happening in England at the time. We know that in Western Europe, Catholicism was the dominant form of Christianity. When you were in world history, you learned that there was an Eastern Orthodox Christian church, that there was a Catholic church, and that there was going to be a Protestant Reformation, meaning the Protestant church is going to form in rebellion to what was happening in the Catholic church. A man named Martin Luther wrote something called the 95 Theses. If you remember, this is when he nailed this document to the door of the Catholic cathedral in his city. And it was called Protestant because he had these 95 protests against the church. He pinpointed corruption and things that were happening in the Catholic Church that he found objectionable. And if you notice, one of them I have there is called indulgences. Indulgences might sound familiar if you remember that people would make a donation to the church, and in return, they were supposed to earn salvation. So they're basically saying if you need to save your soul, it's dependent on the size of your indulgence or gift to the church. Well, people like Martin Luther objected to this. They said this was corruption, and that was a huge objection he had to the Catholic Church. He also thought there should be more direct contact between the worshiper and God, and that you didn't need the priest to tell you what God was saying because the scripture told you what God was saying. He also believed that the Bible, not the church, was the focus of faith. So Martin Luther is going to start this process of Reformation, but for the English, it's going to become even more severe, shall we say. The Anglican Church originally forms after Henry VIII wants a divorce, but as it grows and gains influence, there are people within that English Protestant church who want to purify it. They say, hey, there's still too much of this corruption, Catholic influence, so we want to make it pure. And those people are called separatists. They separate from the main English church. You might know them as Puritans. We've heard of that. And their goal is to purify that church and go by their own scripture. And because they become pretty unpopular in England because of this view, they decide that they're going to leave and seek refuge in the colonies of the New World, and mainly for reasons of religious liberty. So when we get to those New England colonies, this is the main place that these separatists and Puritans are going to end up. So there's reasons for the colonies that are going to grow at this time. And on the left side, I'm going to talk about kind of what's happening in England. First of all, there's a population boom. There's a lot of people. And because of that, England's becoming crowded. Their cities are becoming crowded. Poverty is rising. There's also something called the land enclosure movement. And it's hard, of course, to become a landowner. There's limited amount of land in England. And there was also the way that the land was enclosed. It would stay within certain families for generations and generations, which meant all of these people who are being born aren't getting the opportunity to own land or move out of their social class. Raw materials for British industry. Britain is a small country with limited farmland. And as we know, British colonies are going to spread throughout the world. And one of the main reasons for this is to get materials for commerce, to sell, to buy, to produce products. Government supported industries. In this case, we're going to see that most of these companies, quote unquote, are charter companies that are sponsored by the king, which is the British government. They also wanted markets for British goods. If I'm growing cotton in the New World and I send it to England and I produce clothing, I can sell that clothing back to the colonists in the New World. So that's a market. Those are people to buy your products. There's also a very, very cold kind of mini ice age that happens. And this leads to, just like the stuff we're going through now, we're going through a climate change just like they did, where you have crop failures, famine, you have social unrest due to the fact that people are all of these social things are happening at the same time as this climate change. Now, other motives for this are, of course, just like the Spanish. The Spanish, one of their motives, besides finding gold, was to spread, in this case, Protestant Christianity. The English want to spread this Puritanism that the Puritans did, just like the Spanish had wanted to spread Catholicism. There is a price revolution. Since there's a lot of commerce happening, there's also a lot of opportunities for the British Parliament to raise revenue, meaning money, raise money by taxing. There's also, because of these colonies, a huge need to grow the British Navy and the British Army in general. And an economic depression means that there's homeless and unemployed who are looking for opportunities, and they're going to find these opportunities across the sea in these New World colonies. So down here at the bottom, you'll see that these are all arguments for planting these new settlements in the New World. And one of the first companies that's going to attempt to do this is called the Virginia Company. So what they do is the king issues charters, and these charters are like permission for you to take these companies to the New World and found a colony. The Virginia Company of London. King James I gave a charter to create a colony, and basically the land goes between New Jersey. You can kind of see the line. This is a little hard to read, but the charter goes between kind of here, New Jersey, and here, North Carolina. So at first, the English colonies were pretty limited, but as time goes on, these charters are going to expand into more territory. The main area we're talking about today is the Chesapeake. This right here is the Chesapeake area. The modern-day state of Maryland and Virginia are right on the Chesapeake Bay. And the main source of revenue here, at first, they think, is going to be finding gold. But as the colonies sort of time moves on, they realize they're not finding gold, and they're going to need a quick way to make money. And that's going to result in a cash crop, namely tobacco, being grown in Virginia. And at first, the conditions we're going to see are very harsh, very strict. And the settlers, as they are not finding gold, are trying to look to these other ways to raise revenue. Okay. So on the left, you may see a familiar Disney depiction. This is supposed to be John Smith, who was an English settler. and Pocahontas, who was a Powhatan Native American. She was actually the daughter of Powhatan, the chieftain, but that became kind of the name of the nation. And according to this movie, besides dancing around in glitter and waterfalls and falling in love and all of that, Pocahontas saves John Smith from being killed by the Powhatan Indians. So, of course, being history class, we have to crush all your childhood dreams and tell you that Pocahontas is not real. Well, I should take that back. Pocahontas, the Disney version of Pocahontas, is not real. Pocahontas also, if you kind of look at the cartoon version here, you see this couple maybe like in their early 20s or they're teenagers. Pocahontas was about 12 years old when John Smith came to the New World. She also didn't end up marrying John Smith at all. She ended up marrying a guy named John Rolfe. The real Pocahontas you see over on the right, and this is later in her life after she'd already been married. She had a son with John Rolfe, I believe, and this portrait of her was painted in England when she visited there. She was a Native American, and you can see she's she's dressed in English clothes, and she was, married to an Englishman by this time. So it's one of those stories that, I don't mind 5-year-olds watching the Disney version of history at all, but of course it's our responsibility to learn the actual facts of history. So there, I've ruined Pocahontas for you. That's great. Okay, last thing we're going to finish up here with is Jamestown itself. This is going to be the very first settlement, English settlement in the New World. It's going to be in that Chesapeake Bay area. And in contrast to those religious motives that we heard for the New England colonies, the motive here is money. The Chesapeake colonists don't really have these religious motives. They're there to make money. A lot of them are unemployed. A lot of them are going to be indentured servants. So 1607, this Jamestown colony settlement is created. It's a very bad choice for a settlement because the land is very swampy and very humid, not a super good choice for growing most crops. And when most of these settlers get there, they're not finding gold. And so suddenly they're having to survive by trying to grow food, fishing, farming, and they're not having a huge amount of luck at that. Half the settlers die in the first winter. The company keeps sending more settlers, and pretty soon they have the problem of, continuity. So they're most of these indentured servants who are coming are male. There aren't a lot of women, so they're not having a lot of families who are settling this area. It's going to be very different in the New England area, but as far as the Chesapeake, that was the situation then. Captain John Smith, who we saw on the previous slide, the non-cartoon version of him, had a motto saying, he who shall not work shall not eat. And he meant that. He's, basically said, if you're a settler, you're a servant of this colony, and if you don't work for your daily bread, you will not get it. Because the situation, especially the first 2 winters there, was very desperate. He is going to encounter Powhatan when he first gets there. Powhatan is going to capture John Smith and threaten his life, and the mythological, possibly, story of that is that Pocahontas throws herself over John Smith and begs her father not to kill him. I guess that's the Disney version too. I don't know. That is kind of one of those stories like the first Thanksgiving that's a little sketchy on accuracy, but we'll go with that. So that is the Jamestown Chesapeake colony. The next time I do a presentation, I'm going to contrast this area with that New England religious settler colony. Okay, I'm going to pause here